This show is supported by Blue Land. We hear a lot about microplastics in oceans and food, but they can also come from products we use every day at home, including cleaning products. Blue Land is on a mission to make it easy for everyone to make sustainable choices. Blue Land believes that hardworking, clean products can be the norm, not the exception, so that you can do better for your family and the planet at the same time. From cleaning sprays and toilet bowl cleaner to dishwasher and laundry detergent tablets, Blue Land's products are independently tested to perform alongside major brands, and the formulas are free from dyes, parabens, and harsh chemicals. You'll love not having to choose between the safe option and what actually gets your house clean. Blue Land is a certified B Corp and Leaping Bunny cruelty-free certified. Their formulas are EPA's Safer Choice certified, and many products have also earned Cradle to Cradle's Gold Material Health Certificate. If you're looking to make a small change in your routine, you can get 15% off your first order at blueland.com/prx. Get 15% off your first order by going to blueland.com/prx. blueland.com/prx. This show is supported by Odoo. When you buy business software from lots of vendors, the costs add up and it gets complicated and confusing. Odoo solves this. It's a single company that sells a suite of enterprise apps that handles everything from accounting to inventory to sales. Odoo is all connected on a single platform in a simple and affordable way. You can save money without missing out on the features you need. Check out Odoo at odoo.com. That's odoo.com.
Do I think the future is going to be different? Yes. What it will look like? Question mark. Should they be worried? Yeah, again, too little, too late for some of the brands.
I say only Chinese brand can kill Chinese brand. They can be a real competitors.
I think the industry is primed now for disruptors to come in and really do things a little bit differently. We have deep diligence process for all the historical data that XDS has, making millions of bikes for a lot of brands. We sort of know what's been made and what's sold well, what types of specs and what types of R&D decisions have contributed to better performance. All this data is available. It informs the platform of XLab a lot more productively than what the average industry participant might be able to do.
The first day I got the bike, it was the craziest thing. 11:43, the bike, because everybody got hyped up from Sea Otter, and I got it right the next week after Sea Otter. So the bike came off the truck at 11:43. Not bullshitting you, 11:43 a.m. By 12 o'clock, I had built and sold the first one. 17 minutes later, that first day we sold 7. The next day I sold 7, and the next day I sold 7.
From Escape Collective, this is Overnight Success, the podcast about the entrepreneurs, the personalities, and the passionate people who make up the sport of cycling and the stories behind the icons they've built.
In the first 2 episodes of this series, we have for sure established one thing. The cycling industry is changing. But one of the single biggest changes is one we wanted to dedicate a whole episode to. That's the rise of the Chinese brands. There's Winspace, QuickPro, XLab, Amflow, Avinox, L2. In just the last couple of years, these names have become mainstream. The bikes and the components have even made it to the WorldTour, and they've got many positive reviews in the Western cycling media. There are a lot of questions around all this, so me and Wade set out to get some answers. Because on the face of it, these brands might look like they came out of nowhere and they flooded the market with cheaper, more affordable things. But almost no one inside the industry thinks it was all that sudden. Most of the bikes we ride have already been built in Asia for decades. So perhaps it was only a matter of time before those factories started putting their own names on bikes and bringing them onto the market themselves. That is what we wanted to dig into. What exactly made all these Chinese brands want to expand their markets right now, and whether there even is a clear explanation for it. Just a quick note before we carry on. You are only able to listen to this full episode if you are an Escape Collective member. If you're not, then we will cut the episode off for you about halfway through. But don't worry, if you want to hear the rest, you can simply head over to escapecollective.com/overnight success. We are giving 50% off memberships for anyone who is listening to this series. So once you've signed up, you get instructions on how to access the member feed straight away, and you can continue listening to the brilliant second half of this episode. And obviously, as a member, you don't only get this one episode, but you'll get all the rest of this series. You'll get all the past and future Overnight Success episodes, the great industry content, the rest of our member-only podcasts, and all the written member-only articles that we put out on the site every single day. I believe that is worth becoming a member, and I hope you think so too. So Wade, we've got to episode 3, and we are going to talk about something that we've been hinting at many times in the first 2 episodes. A lot of people have been eagerly waiting for us to talk about this topic, which is the rise of Chinese and Asian brands. So we've both done a heap of research and interviews for this one, and we could not quite include everything here in this episode. It would have been a 3-hour-long one, I think.
Yeah, easy.
Yeah, but we have put together the main points of this conversation. So Wade, do you want to tell what we're going to cover in the next few interviews?
Yeah, it is the quiet rise of these Chinese brands. None of them are new by any means, but they're new to us. And there's a lot to cover here for sure, and so many whys. We're going to chat with experts and people within these brands and why they've seemingly just appeared in these markets just now, especially at such a difficult time for the brands in these markets, which is kind of puzzling, but they all have good reasons. Why they're able to keep their prices lower and why we might see them reshape the whole industry. To that end, you were able to get a cracker of an interview at the end with a guy who runs a well-established bike shop in New York City, and he has some fascinating stories to tell of being on the front lines, actually selling these bikes and some pretty incredible sales at scale. So like, this is not just them entering a market that's quiet. There's some pretty interesting things happening, and these things are just flying off the shelf, especially in this market. So in our first interview, we speak with an industry veteran named Jiayu Yang. Jiayu is a wealth of experience and knowledge about the bike industry itself, and she is Taiwanese and based there as well. She has her ear to the ground on what's happening in the region and is able to put all of that into context for us. So in the interest of full disclosure, Jiayu serves on the board of Haro Bikes, and being Taiwanese, you have to understand the heightened political tensions between Taiwan and China. And I'm mindful here that maybe there's a limit to what she can and can't say and how open she can be while commenting on this topic of Chinese brands. My words, not hers, but I am mindful of that. One thing that people have described to me, and I'm like, I don't know if that's true or not, I better actually look into this more, is that, you know, as things go up the supply chain all the way to manufacturing and raw material sourcing, it's been described that, you know, that most of that is in Asia and in China in particular, and that is what has potentially given such quick rise to some of these brands that we haven't heard so much from before COVID, and, you know, canceled orders and the overstock and all that sort of thing. Is there any truth to that? Or if not, what is the contributing factor to this seemingly quick rise to these Chinese brands?
Well, I definitely agree part of it. I think to describe the rising of the Chinese brand is actually very big topic. But at the same time, I think that just give you a little bit background. Actually, it's always their country. They're always their strategy to promote their own national brand. So you can also see the same thing happening to a lot of other industry, especially on the consumer electronic business. You can see like DJI, you know, like Inter 360.
The sports cameras.
Yeah, actually, I think also e-car is one of the biggest. You can see BYD, yeah, Xiaomi, and all these things. And also, you know, the mobile phone as well. Actually, most of the phone are, well, no matter it's a Vivo or Huawei, Xiaomi, they are all China brand now. Even Motorola have been acquired by China. So you can see actually now, it's not just a bike industry. It's already happened in a lot of consumer electronics business already. But at the same time, which is right, the reason why the Chinese brand, they grow so quickly. So first of all, of course, they have a very mature supply chain. And even in the bicycle industry, so for example, like XDS, they already manufacture from the frame to complete bike. So does Winspace. They have a carbon factory. The list can go on. Even Aventon, they have their own bike assembly factory as well. Aventon is the founder, they are Chinese American, but the father have a assembly factory in China. So you can see there's a lot of vertical integration behind that. But I think it's just part of the reason. And I think everyone said, oh, COVID pushed that Chinese brand. But I don't think COVID is a reason. I will only describe like COVID is a accelerator, but it's not the ignition.
What conditions did the pandemic create in China?
So first of all, let's say what COVID didn't do. COVID didn't make Chinese brands decide to go overseas. The decision was kind of like made like 20 years ago. Is the whole country, the big country strategy. I think that is one thing have to keep in mind. Secondly, that what COVID did is during pandemic, then the capacity expanded massively. So after COVID, they also have to find a way out.
Right.
But at the same time, another important thing is COVID actually helped to boosting China domestic market, and it makes China domestic market become a healthier market. So they have more rides, they have a more mature rider. They want a good bike, and they have a lot of racing events. At the same time, the local government also built a lot of bike park. So I think all this kind of like boosting the whole industry.
Interesting. I'd like to hear more about the government support. I've heard a lot about this, like they give subsidies to a number of, let's say, solar manufacturing facilities, and then they let them kind of like let capitalism kind of battle it out, and then one winner usually comes out of that. I've heard that described in that way before. How does that work in the bike industry?
I think it's also the same. So just interesting enough, earlier this year, I talked to a very big motorcycle company. It's also a public company. They also mentioned, because I asked them, I say, why there are so many different industry in China want to come into bike industry. For example, like a DJI. Well, I remember even Xiaomi have tried to come into the bike industry before, but they are not they wasn't successful for them.
They did. I didn't know that.
Yeah, they make some bike. I remember they manufacture in Mini Cycle, but anyway. So I was very curious, and they say actually they do get subsidized from the government, and the subsidize depends on their revenue. This is just what I heard from two sources. I cannot verify if this what they told me is true or not. So please be careful. But what they told me is they said they were based on KPI. So they will have the revenue growth plan. And if they hit the revenue and the government will give the subsidy, actually it's pretty big. Some might even like a 2.5% their profit, so which is not small. I'm not saying it's profit itself. It's not just like gross margin or whatever. They actually subsidy played an important role to the profit. So I will be surprised. Not sure if it's a mistake or what. And secondly, in China, actually the competition is very, very tough. And also all the markets have been pretty mature. So they have to step out from their comfort zone, and they have to try to do something else to expanding their category and territory, and then so they can have more revenue. And actually one thing is China government, they pushing for sports, and they're also pushing for green energy. So bicycling actually fits into these two categories. So they consider it's a safe investment because as a sport, it's healthy, or she likes sport, so which is good. And then another thing is that he also promote like a green energy, and the e-bike fit perfectly into this category. To be honest, otherwise, the DJI is such a big company, and why they have to come to the bike business?
That answers my question of why the heck DJI got into e-bikes or e-bike motors. I didn't know that until that observation. What is the current state of the bike industry in China, as far as you know? Like the health of it?
I think the domestic market actually, the price war is it's a very, very serious price war there. And everyone is cutting price. Every time like I can get the new pricing from all the different brands, that was crazy. And everyone is discounting. At the same time, they also try to find a way out. So for example, like going overseas is one thing because the margin they can get from domestic market is very, very tough. So they try to, who are capable, they try to go overseas. And everyone I talk to, they are eager for orders. They want orders.
The manufacturers are eager to get orders.
Yes.
Yeah. When I spoke to somebody a couple years ago who worked for Specialized, this is the time when the Western markets are really struggling because of COVID. He was saying that 50% growth is not even big in that market and they're booming. And then I have heard afterwards that it caught up to the Chinese market. Is that what's going on with these pricing wars in that? Has the market softened? Has a parallel mirrored experience happened just a little bit later in China with a lot of new people into bikes and then they don't come back and over inventory and all that? Is that what's taking place?
I think all above. And so like I say, COVID actually boost, helping to pushing the domestic market. More people ride the bike. But at the same time, when maybe not everyone stayed. So that's the first thing. And the second thing is and then all of a sudden, like too many manufacturers, they want to capitalize their capacity, they invest during COVID. And then the China market definitely is one of the best market because it's domestic. So, you have so massively a player in the same market and they have to compete with each other. And remember, one interesting thing, I remember like right after COVID, of course, Shimano, of course, like all the Western brand, they cancel the orders and Shimano at the time, actually their China market portion rising quite a lot. But they are very, very cautious because they see that as another COVID pandemic, but only happening in China. So they have very strict rule, like you cannot cancel the order or you have to prepay or something. That's what I heard.
Jiayu told me the inventory hangover arrived in China on a delay. A similar situation running about 2 years behind the one in Western markets. She mentioned that Shimano treated the surge of Chinese orders with caution, and they made sure prepayments were made on those orders. And the numbers back her up. For example, China was Merida's and Giant's most profitable region in 2023 and 2024, and those companies are publicly traded so we can see their finances. By the first quarter of 2026, both of them were losing money for the first time in years. Can you describe in general terms what the Chinese market for cyclists look like? Because it seems to be more emerging from an outside perspective, and there might be more opportunity for first of all, newcomers or maybe entrants and lower cost bikes. Is that where a lot of the growth was coming from, or was it the high end, or people moving between low to high? What does that look like from your view?
I do know it's a huge market. So of course you have a cheap bike and you have an expensive bike. I remember during 2023 and even to 2025, the demand for the high-end brands high, like Conago, Pinarello, Cervelo, Giant, Specialized, Trek. I remember like a Trek and Specialized. Actually, I talked to a few of their staff from Taiwan, and they also confirmed like the China market becomes super important for them, especially even for Giant in high end. But things changed because China economy is also not that fantastic. And also actually the government tried to create a narrative is our own brand is not worse than the Western brand. So they consciously to promote the Chinese own brand. So in the past, when we say in China, when you say high end, of course you're thinking about like Conago, Pinarello, Cervelo, Specialized, this top high end brand.
Yeah.
And usually in the past, Chinese own brand, they will be considered as more lower end.
Yeah. Okay. I see. Yep.
Yeah, but during these years, I think since when the cycling booming of the cycling in China, actually the whole narrative of their own Chinese own brand has been consciously turned that into like, oh, our own China brand is not worse than Western brand.
The Chinese brand is worse than the Western brand.
It's not. So
Not
they try
worse.
to
It's better.
Yeah, not
Yeah.
worse. It's better.
Yeah, yeah.
Or if
Yeah.
equivalent.
Got it. Got it.
For those few years, you can see that type of a narrative has always been, they have consciously been talked about or being created so you can see that narrative actually within the China, their own domestic forum, talking about their own Chinese brand as well.
Jiayu was really good there at giving us a broader picture of what's been happening in the Asian market and kind of why we are seeing the rise of these brands in the Western markets now. And we often don't get that insight. There's a lack of data overall in the industry, let alone in specific regions. And one thing that she brought up there is subsidies. And it's something that is being brought up a lot as the main reason why these brands are able to expand so quickly. And I wanted to just say about that, it is really hard to verify. We've tried in what scale these are maybe paid out and to whom and based on what. So while we can maybe guess that there might be something like this going on, but we can't say for sure.
It certainly happens in other industries, and which is more widely publicized. So who are we going to talk to next, Huvi?
Well, we're going to talk with Joe Whittingham. So we're going to move to a slightly different side. He is perhaps most well known to the cycling world through his YouTube channel, which is called China Cycling, and his online retail platform, Panda Podium, which offers this kind of curated selection of Chinese products. And if we said earlier in the episodes that distributors have a good insight into what's happening in kind of all parts of the sector, Joe is a bit like that when it comes to Chinese goods. He has a really good idea of what's happening in the Chinese market, but also with manufacturers because he actually himself lives in Xiamen, but the majority of his customers are Western. And in my interview with him, it was quite clear that even though we think that the rise of Chinese brands is very recent, he has been talking about all this for a good part of a decade.
The way I describe Panda Podium is like Chinese bike parts on easy mode. Like, we try to make the process as simple as possible because so now most people are starting to hear like, oh, the Chinese stuff's good now, or like, you know, it's improved a lot, etc., etc. But like, you go on the internet and you start going down the rabbit hole, and very quickly, like, it gets very confusing. And some of that is just because of the language barrier, but just some of that is just because of the sheer volume of just products and brands that you've never heard of. And so obviously in the West, when you get into cycling, you have all the nuance of like which brands you've seen your friends riding and all this stuff. So you have like a mental map of which brands seem to be legit and which ones aren't. But when you're suddenly thrown into or you dive into the world of Chinese or Asian brands, very quickly you don't have that map right. I think that's another advantage that we have as being like not a brand ourselves, but being a third party. We do our own testing, and then as part of that, we have good relationships with these brands too. And so we'll go into their factories and just make sure they're doing, their due diligence and what they should be doing. Very quickly, people were like, oh, wow, that product is good for the price. And back then, that was the main thing that the Chinese brands could compete on back then was the price. Like, the absolute performance wasn't quite up there, but the price to performance ratio was through the roof. And so people were getting impressed with the products. But in the comments, it was always the same question, like, oh, where can I buy it? And so some of the products, like, even on AliExpress, I couldn't find it to give people an AliExpress link. But then some products I'd find on AliExpress and like there'd be two different sellers selling it and the price would be like double in one price to the other. I'm like, well, is this just a really good deal or is this like a fake or a scam or whatever? So I never felt confident promoting a seller that I didn't have firsthand experience with or whatever. So yes, that became the first thing. I was like, okay, these products are getting good now, or at least good for the money. If we could give consumers like a reputable place to buy it from and a little bit of marketing, because as much as people don't want to admit it, like the name of the logo on your down tube, people care, right? So you got to make it not too embarrassing or not too cringe to ride. Whether we succeed or not at that is a question mark, because lots of the names of the brands on our website, even I have a hard time stomaching. So I'm not saying all of the Chinese brands are perfect by any means. And yeah, so my first job in the bike industry was with a brand, Windspace. They got very popular back in the day because they came in just before the COVID boom, basically. And I think they were the first ones to really take off as being like the direct from China is now legit kind of brand. And yeah, so that was cool.
And it does seem like 2025 was the year I feel that the brands really broke out. Like XDS started to sponsor and Windspace was making headway. And it just seems, I don't know if that's your perspective coming from China, but just that 2025 felt like the kind of breakout year where everything started to boom.
I think it's tough for me because, like you say, like I'm against this every single day, and it's like I have a son who's now taller than me, and like I never saw him get taller than me. He was just taller than me one day because like you see it every day, you don't see it growing. And so yeah, as the guy who's been the crazy guy in the room talking about the Chinese bike stuff for ages, it's always been mainstream to me. But no, like I think you're right. Like, or if you go to Google Trends and start looking at like Chinese frames or something, you can see the little bumps that happened. Yeah, I think 2019, 2020 was like a big bump where it went to like the enthusiast. But I'd say 2025 was a year when like it started to poke more into the mainstream. So I often talk about like the pyramid of like cyclists or cycling consumers. Like the guys at the top are the guys who, you know, are listening to every single podcast and girls, and like every single website, every single YouTube video, just consuming all of the information. And then the guys and girls below, you know, they're doing less so, and you go down the pyramid. And as you go down the pyramid, the amount of time you spend reading about bikes online gets less and less, but the amount of people in this layer of the pyramid gets more and more, obviously. So yeah, I think the Chinese or the Asian stuff is slowly working its way down this pyramid. Again, I'm in my own little bubble, so I think everyone in the world knows about Chinese bike stuff now. But anecdotally, when I was in the US for SEALDA 2 months ago, like go on some group rides, talk to some people, and yeah, there's still plenty of people out there who never heard of any of the Chinese brands and never heard of Podium. So I still think there's a way of the pyramid to go down. I think what XLab and XDS are doing and like going more for the bike shop approach, that's going to help it go even further down the pyramid as well. Because one of the barriers to entry with even with Podium, where we try to make it as simple as possible, like we don't sell complete bikes at this point. We're still selling frames and wheel sets and group sets. And so you either have to have the knowledge to make your bike yourself, or take to your local bike shop who may or may not want to touch it and all of this stuff. So yeah, if you want to get to the very bottom of the pyramid, complete bikes, like Canyon style direct consumer even may be the way to go.
How do you decide yourself what you stock? Because when you mentioned in the beginning that you can go to AliExpress and you can literally scroll hundreds of thousands of pages probably of bikes and brands, and you're not wiser looking at them and of what to buy. And you obviously curate that in a way, so you pick what you're going to stock on your site. So how do you decide? Do you approach the brand? Do the brands approach you now? Has that changed in the time that you've been operating?
Yeah, very good question, because it has changed a lot. So back in the day, like I had to like bang on doors, and because like lots of the brands were selling things here. The narrative you'll hear a lot that lots of the brands here are factory brands, and those factories are also OEM for overseas clients, and they don't want to annoy their overseas clients. That changed because of the post-COVID boom burst. In those days, when the brands didn't want to annoy their overseas customers, I had to like beg them to let me sell their stuff overseas because maybe they didn't want to, and all this stuff. Or even though like some of their brands, like they were doing direct consumer sales, but they weren't doing a very good job, and they didn't want to give that up because obviously if they go direct consumer, they get higher margins. And so I'd have to give them a song and dance of like, oh, but if you sell through us, you'll make less margin, but we'll do more quantity, blah, 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 blah. Like, you know, what good is the best wheel set in the world if no one knows about it? And so that's changed a lot over the years. As you were saying, like, how do you choose what goes on the website? Again, being cyclists ourselves, it really is like, if it's something that I would want to ride myself, then I want to sell it on the site. So the first thing is we'll talk with the brand first and see if they're interested in selling overseas. Are there any barriers that would stop us selling overseas? And then we'll get some samples in and ride it ourselves.
We already touched on it earlier that 2025 seemed to be the kind of breaking year, not maybe for you. So what do you think that is behind it? You already mentioned there when you talked about the markets, you mentioned quite a few things, that maybe political situation, maybe also how the media portrays all these brands. But what would you say, being in China, like has there been a bigger push? This is what I'm curious about. Has there been something that has changed within the industry there that has pushed these brands to go direct to consumer, expand to the US so heavily, and or like with this kind of, I guess, weight that they're expanding seems a lot stronger.
Yeah, I think it would be easily digestible to put it all on one or two things, but I believe the truth is it's more like 10 things. The biggest of those we can talk about, like I'd say, so 2019, 2020, the COVID bubble in the West, all the Western brands are just ordering like more frames, more wheels, more wheels. And the factories here like invest in new production lines and new facilities and all of this stuff. And then, okay, it's all on board, it's all up and running. And then suddenly the post-boom burst in the West, all of the Western brands go, oh no, actually, I don't need this order, and I don't need any order for next year and a half either, because my warehouse is all full. And so then you have these Chinese factories, which now have this huge capacity production, no one to place orders. The other flip side of that is, as I said earlier, the factories, they didn't want to annoy their OEM customers originally because, you know, that's where most of the money was coming from. But now when your OEM customers have canceled all the orders for the next year and a half, you don't have to worry about offending them so much. So that led to them launching their own brands. But then that also coincided with, there was a similar boom of cycling in China. I'd say like 2023 to 2024, post-COVID bubble, some of the brands here, like they focused their efforts on going overseas. I'd say like Elite Wheels is a good example that most people will know. Like they always seem to stay focused on overseas. Anecdotally, within China, you don't see them much being sold here or ridden here. And again, they're based in Xiamen. I'm good friends with them. Like I'd say this to their face. But whereas other brands, like they quickly pivoted back to focusing on the domestic market for the 2023, 2024 Chinese boom. I'd say XPS, like XLab is a good example of that. Like were really, really popular during the cycling boom here because you had so many people getting into the sport, and most of them wanted like a $1,000 to $3,000 equivalent road bike, and that's kind of like the XDS sweet spot maybe. And then 2024 end of going into 2025, the boom here just kind of also started to fizzle out. And no particular reason, just because, you know, there's 1.4 billion people, but once all the cyclists have a new bike, they don't need 10, right? And so yeah, like it just started to filter off, and it was the same situation as in the West. Like so now all of the brands here have full warehouses of products, or they have big production lines and all this stuff. So I think that's when the big 2025 push came of like lots of brands going, okay, well, it's now or never. Like if we don't go into the West now, like the domestic market has gone down, so let's go in the West. And again, this is a bit of generalizing because, as I said earlier, like different brands had different strategies during that. Like there are some brands that very clearly went like Western and then back to China and then back to Western again. But every time they changed their focus, like they fell back a few steps as well. The few brands that always stayed committed to one market or the other have done a lot better in their respective markets, I'd say. So yeah, that's one of the reasons it went mainstream. I think another reason it went mainstream, again, everyone's social media feed is different, but I think 2025, aside from bikes, I think lots of people's social media feeds was showing people about robots in China and, you know, flying cars, I don't know, whatever. Like people are trying to wake up that like, oh wow, China is no longer behind us technologically, like they are equal or ahead of us. I think this was something that lots of people were experiencing in their social media feeds.
I would like to ask you, because you have been on that side of the table for a while, what the perception was in the beginning from your customers and kind of people who you talk to about Chinese bikes and parts and wheels, and maybe how that's changed over the years.
Back in the day, since I've been in the industry, like very clear to see back in the day, our customer was the guy or girl at the very top of the pyramid. Like they already had like 8 bikes and they knew exactly what internal rim width they wanted, and they knew exactly. It still happens now, but back then I used to feel so sorry for my sales guys because the questions from customers, because the customers like are such nerds. Like, and again, I'm a nerd, so I'm not throwing shade. They ask such nerdy questions, like just asking for like bearing sizes and tolerance and stuff. Like, imagine going into a Honda dealership to buy a car and asking the salesman like what size bearings are in the wheel. Like the salesman would just like explode, and that's a £30,000 purchase. Yeah, I used to feel very sorry for my sales guys back in the day. Thankfully, as we're going down the pyramid, the questions are getting easier and easier now. Like, does it come in blue? Okay, I can answer that a bit easier. One narrative we've seen a lot as well, like so many people come in skeptical. I think, again, because we're Pandapodium, especially, we're like the Chinese stuff on easy mode. So people use us as like the gateway into it. And then maybe afterwards they start doing their own thing and go direct consumer. That's fine. But yeah, because we're the easy in, lots of people start with us. And so that means that when they come in, they're often skeptical. Plenty of people, like, we see the same story again and again. Like, they've got a few bikes, they're a Cat 2 racer in the Masters maybe, or blah, blah, blah. And they've got, the wife rides sometimes too. But like, they'll buy a set of wheels for their wife's bike. Every single time it happened, it played out so many times. 4 weeks later, they'll come back to you and buy like 2 more sets of wheels for their bikes. Again, this is another rabbit hole. I think psychologically we have like a thing where, like, if we've bought an expensive bike or expensive wheels for ourselves in the past, we don't want to admit that we made a purchasing mistake. But then when you see like, oh wait, these are actually really good wheels, I'm going to go buy some for myself because I want to drop 200 grams off my bike, or because I want to have a more modern internal rim width, whereas the Western brands haven't caught up yet and stuff like this. So it's definitely going more and more mainstream. And yeah, just if you go through the chat logs or the emails of customers support and stuff, the consumer who's buying the Chinese stuff is definitely definitely changing. So
thanks for listening to this preview of Overnight Success. To hear the full episode, you'll need to be an Escape Collective member. And here's why that matters. We cover cycling and its industry without taking money from it. No ads, no sponsors, no conflicts of interests, no fear or favor. That's only possible because our members make it possible. If listening to this has made you think, this is different, this is exactly why. It's deliberately how we're set up. In return, we try to make membership genuinely worth it. Exclusive content to all our podcasts and our website. A member purchase program with exclusive pro deal pricing that I guarantee can save you far more than the cost of joining. An annual member summit. This year we're going to Japan. A clean, ad-free podcast feed. And a positive and welcoming community that's unlike anything else in cycling or the internet. But more than any of that, it's our member support that lets us tell these stories that no one else can. If you'd like to join us and support our mission of independence and creating a better internet, head to escapecollective.com/overnightsuccess to find out more.